Hello, welcome to Productions MJC.
Occasionally I'll get recommendations or pop-ups or suggestions, and I was looking at this one, Simon Dan, and he was complaining about Chris UK and John Smith Globeli or something like that. They were talking about this field of view video, complaining about it, and I thought to myself, well, the field of view is really a circle, not a square. I started to think differently than Simon Dan. He was just complaining, swearing, using all sorts of derogatory stuff. And you know, I've used derogatory against some people before, but lately I've started to put forward alternate ideas, alternate solutions or thoughts. And Simon Dan mentioned a gate experiment. So I went out and took a look at the gate experiment that he was talking about. And I got thinking about both these videos and what alternates or extra ideas or different things we could use to make this worthwhile. Because there were things that Simon Dan definitely missed because he was a little too quick and full of ridicule and everything else to really see the value of what can be gained out of that experiment and the gate experiment. So let's focus on the gate experiment right now. Let's take a look at it. We'll get back to the other video in a while, but let's look at this one where Chris UK and John somebody, they put two cameras on this gate. I wish I had access to this gate. But of course Simon Dan, he complains and whines and wails about this gate. And I've actually noticed that about other people. I mean, I've watched some conspiracy cats and Simon Dan. They spend a lot of time ridiculing the other person and complaining about them instead of really getting down to working with the information given and examining it and seeing if something else could be done with it. Now, conspiracy cats, he's too cerebral. He does use his higher knowledge, higher information, higher education as a bludgeon or a weapon instead of as a helping aid. I hope he doesn't teach like that. And the other side of the coin is, of course, Simon Dan, who just bludgeons people with swear words and smart aleck remarks and such. Drives you nuts. And full disclosure, I've done both myself, but I'm trying to become more of a teacher, and I saw in this swing gate experiment where I could not only educate Chris and the John Smith, but other folks into what was going on, what they were seeing, and why what they were being told isn't what was going on. Don't get me wrong, Simon Dan is smart, but he missed this. Totally missed it, and I thought I needed to bring this to the forefront. Now, I do pride myself on becoming sort of a middleman, not too smart alecky, not too cerebral, not too overly bright. You know, bring the science down to the basic layperson level. That's what I think I try to do. So let's look at Chris's experiment. We have the North Pole and the South Pole, the rotating axis of the gate, and that represents the Earth in the yellow line. Now we have the green line that represents something. So let's try to determine what that something might be. We have yaw, pitch, and roll. If we were to just translate the gate movement to airplane movement, and the movement of the gate is obviously along the yaw axis. The gate is swinging horizontally left and right only. It doesn't move up and down, it's going left and right. That's the yaw axis. And the gate doesn't seem to have any pitch up or down or roll around in a circle. It only has yaw, left and right. So let's look at that again in terms of gate movement only for the time being. We have the yellow line, which is the yaw axis, and the gate moves along that. The gate does not move along the pitch axis, which is the light blue line. So we can eliminate that for the time being. Now let's focus on this one here. An interesting thing about flat earth video makers and flat earth believers, they forget, well, they either forget it or they disingenuously ignore it or they intentionally try to hide it. But let's look at what I'm talking about. and that is that the globe Earth moves along the yellow yaw axis. I don't remember Simon Dan pointing this out or anybody else. Now, the reason that this is so significant is because the swinging gate actually represents a model of the flat Earth far better than the globe, because the globe doesn't move the way the gate does. And let me clarify that. While the Earth and the gate do move along the y-axis, the Earth doesn't extend out along that green axis. The globe Earth rotates around the yellow yaw axis. It doesn't extend outward like that green directional does, like a gate. Now, a flat Earth idea or model or whatever you believe, whatever you want to call it, does extend out along that green line. So in reality, the swinging gate is more a conception of the flat Earth instead of the globe Earth. And I'll help you understand more about that next. Because Chris has marked the gate with markers indicating England and Florida and the equator, having indicated that the pole on the right, the styrofoam, is the North Pole on his swinging gate experiment. Here he's pointing to England, and that's what that mark represents. And here he's pointing to Florida, and that's what that mark represents on his gate. You may or may not have noticed a problem already, but I'll get to that. We're going to take a look at the very end. He's out to what he says is the camera at the equator, and herein lies the problem. On the yellow yaw axis on the Earth, I have marked in black little stripes the England, Florida equator marks. However, on the green is where it's marked on his gate with little yellow ticks. But you'll notice that the Earth doesn't look like that, it's not shaped like that, and it doesn't move like that. The green line or the gate doesn't represent a globe Earth at all. So when he points to the North Pole and says there's the North Pole and this styrofoam with the stick poking out of it and the camera is the North Pole, the rest of that gate doesn't represent a globe Earth in the slightest. When you slow down and think about it, he's staring at it, he's looking right at it and supposedly can't see it. He's taken measurements from the yaw axis, the yellow axis, and he's transposed them onto that other green indicator. And when the Earth is laid down with the markings in a similar plane to the gate, what happens? Well, the green indicator goes crazy because it's not even pointed in the right direction. The gate he's using, I wish I had access to it because it could be used as a representation of the flat Earth concept, and you could sit and use it and do things with it and try to make it work, which it won't, but you could try. You might ask, what's the use? Why even try? Well, you could take that gate and instead of that camera out there on the far end, you could place a regulation soccer ball. Now, swing that gate as much as you want and use that camera by the North Pole, by the stick, to film the soccer ball and see if the soccer ball changes size at all. It won't because it's an arc. Then use the same soccer ball and walk in a line parallel to a closed gate and the fence behind it, left to right, walking parallel, film it and see if it, like a train or a plane, gets bigger as it comes towards you and then gets smaller as it goes away. Now, pardon me, what I meant by parallel is parallel to the flat, not the gate itself as it sits, but the flat part. The part by that truck there. I hope I'm explaining myself well enough when I mean swing the gate. The gate is perpendicular to that back fence. When it's closed, it's parallel or equal to it. So get your line parallel to the gate when it's closed, but far enough away when the gate is perpendicular, and as you walk by. What'll that prove? It will prove that the sun moves in an arc across the sky and not parallel on a flat line through it. It will actually prove two different things. As you walk parallel to this gate and the back fence, as you walk that way, you will see that the speed of your soccer ball as it grows in size is logarithmic. That means it'll be slower the farther it is away, and then the closer it gets to you, the faster it'll move. And then as it gets farther away from you, it will seem to move slower, because that's what things that move flat do. And you will see the sun doesn't do that. It moves equidistantly because it moves in an arc. Whereas things that move flat, even if they're moving at the same constant rate, appear to move slower the farther they are away from you, faster when they get near you, and then slower. You'll see the sun doesn't do that. It doesn't move slow at sunrise, fast at noon, and slow at sunset. It maintains the exact same constant speed across the sky because it's moving in an actual arc. And even though Simandan hates the gate experiment, it's a perfect learning tool to learn the truth about the globe that you live on. Simandan, you need to take a chill pill, embrace the gate experiment, and use it to teach Chris UK that he's thinking and doing things incorrectly, instead of just swearing at him and telling him, hey, you're stupid, you're doing it wrong. Yes, he is, but let's help him understand how and why. What do you think? And while we're on the subject, let's get with Chris UK and say, you know, your field of view is right, but you're doing it wrong. And how you need to do it is, think a field of view is actually conical, so it's a circle. But let's take that circle and make the inside even smaller. Let's really, really tighten that down to where we have a very small field of view. And what in the world could we do with that field of view? Oh, well, I did an experiment where I used a piece of cardboard. I'll provide a link in the description where I'll show you what I did with that cardboard. I restricted my field of view until it was just barely bigger than the moon at moonrise. And then I observed the moon at regular intervals every hour. On the hour, I watched the moon, and I looked at it through that restricted field of view to see if the moon grew. It's a simple experiment. If the moon, as it traveled across the nighttime sky, outgrew my restricted field of view because it was getting closer to me, then we have our answer. And I did get my answer. Contrary to the flat earth explanation and idea and thought process, the moon stayed exactly the same size all night long. Chris UK, you have some good ideas, but you're tripping yourself up with your incorrect application of the process.
Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. This has been Productions MJC.